All right. Ever wonder how auctions really work? And I don't mean like that antique vase kind of auction.
Yeah.
This deep dive is about the kind of auctions that impact your electricity bill,
Yeah,
even your phone's data plan.
absolutely.
We're talking Nobel Prize winning economics here.
That's right.
Paul Milgrom and Robert Wilson. Get ready to discover why the highest bidder doesn't always win
Yeah.
and how a little strategy could have saved people a lot of cash. Expert speaker, are you ready to expose the strategic bidding secrets, the ones lurking just below the surface?
Absolutely. Let's unravel this. It's a fascinating world, auction economics.
See, when I hear auction, I picture those frantic art auctions,
Yeah.
or maybe like livestock at a county fair.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's easy to forget how deeply these things are woven into our lives.
You're absolutely right. Auctions are way more common than we realize. Their influence extends so far beyond a painting or a prize steer.
So paint us a picture here. What everyday things are decided by auctions?
Okay, well, think about this morning. That cup of coffee,
Yeah.
its price was influenced by electricity auctions. Your internet connection.
Oh, wow.
Yep, auctions again.
Really?
Even your mobile data plan, all shaped by auctions.
Wow, auctions for electricity and internet.
Yeah.
You don't learn that in high school economics. This is way more interesting than I expected.
It really is. And it goes even further. Governments use auctions to sell bonds, which is how they borrow money, and they even auction off permits for carbon emissions
Wow.
to combat climate change. And these auctions, they have a ripple effect on entire economies.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're talking about some seriously valuable stuff being traded here.
We are.
So before we get into how these auctions work, give us Auction Theory 101. What are the key things that determine who wins and how much they pay?
Okay. So at their heart, auctions are influenced by three main factors.
Okay.
First, the auction format itself.
Okay, so are we talking like an open bidding free-for-all where everyone sees what others are offering? Or is this a secretive, sealed bid situation?
Yeah, exactly. And the format also determines how many rounds of bidding are allowed, and even how that final price looks. Do you pay what you bid, or what the second highest bidder offered? These little variations matter.
All right, so format is one piece of the puzzle. What else?
Second is the object's value. And this is where things get really interesting. Does the object have the same worth for everyone involved? We call that common value. Or does it hold a different private value for each bidder?
Okay. I think I'm following. So, like, a rare antique might have a different private value to different collectors based on their own tastes. But a share of company stock would have a more objective common value tied to its performance, right?
You nailed it. And that brings us to the third factor, and this one's often the most intriguing. It's uncertainty.
Okay.
What information do bidders have or think they have about the object's true value? And importantly, about each other's valuations. That's where strategy really kicks in.
Uncertainty, information, strategy. This is starting to sound a lot like a high-stakes poker game.
It is.
And speaking of high stakes, you mentioned something earlier called the winner's curse,
Yes.
which sounds kind of ominous. What's that all about?
This is where things can get tricky.
Okay.
And it's a concept that Robert Wilson really put on the map. Imagine you're at an auction. You're bidding on a raw diamond, hoping to cut and polish it for a profit.
Okay.
You win?
Mhm.
Congratulations.
Woo!
But then this wave of doubt hits you.
Oh.
Everyone else bid lower. Why is that?
Because they knew something you didn't.
Right.
Their own experts probably valued that diamond lower than yours did, and now you're stuck with it,
Exactly.
potentially having paid way too much. Ouch.
That's the sting. That is the sting of the winner's curse. You win, but it's a hollow victory.
Yeah.
And this is especially crucial in those common value auctions like oil leases. Everyone wants that oil, but they have different estimates of how much is actually down there.
Right, based on their own surveys and their own information.
Exactly.
And I'm guessing that Robert Wilson figured out how to avoid getting caught in that trap.
That's right. Wilson's research showed that savvy bidders factor in the risk of the winner's curse. They'll deliberately bid lower than their best estimate to avoid overpaying.
Oh, interesting.
Better to miss out on a good deal than get stuck with a lemon, right?
Yeah. So in a way, being overly enthusiastic can actually backfire on you.
Yes.
But what about those cases where it's not just about a shared common value? Like, let's say you're bidding on a house. I might love a place with a huge yard for my dog,
Yeah.
but its resale value matters too. That's where Paul Milgrom's work comes in, isn't it?
Precisely. Milgrom tackled those more true-to-life scenarios where both private and common values are all mixed up.
Okay.
He called this the affiliated values model.
Okay, so instead of just defining the term, give us an example. How does that actually play out in the real world?
Okay, so picture this. You're at a house auction. You fall in love with the place because of its spacious backyard.
Yeah.
Perfect for your furry friend.
Ah.
That's your private value.
Okay.
But the house's resale value, what other potential buyers might pay for it down the line,
Right.
that's the common value.
Makes sense.
Milgrom dove headfirst into figuring out how these intertwined values play out in an auction setting.
Fascinating. So how did Milgrom's work change our understanding of auctions? Give us the highlights.
Well, one of his biggest contributions was proving that the way an auction is structured
Right.
directly affects how much bidders can learn about each other's valuations.
Oh, wow.
And this, in turn, has a huge impact on the final price.
Okay.
We call this the linkage principle.
Hold on. The type of auction can reveal information. How does that work?
Think of it like a poker game.
Okay.
In an open, ascending bid auction,
Right.
each bid is like laying a card on the table.
Okay.
If someone backs out early,
Yeah.
it might mean they weren't willing to pay more. That's valuable information for the remaining players.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So this transparency
Yeah.
often drives up the final price
Makes sense.
because bidders feel more confident.
Because as the auction goes on, they get more information and they're less worried about overpaying. It's like that initial uncertainty, it fades away a little with each bid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in a sealed bid auction,
Yeah.
everyone's in the dark. You have no clue what others are thinking or how much they're willing to pay.
Right.
And that uncertainty, it makes bidders more cautious,
Yeah.
often leading to lower final prices.
Interesting.
Milgrom's research, it gave us this framework for understanding how this flow of information, how it impacts the outcome.
That's wild. So just tweaking the format can totally change the game.
Yeah.
But it sounds like Milgrom, though, wasn't content with simply understanding auctions. He was out to reinvent them.
You got it.
Yeah.
Back in the early 1990s, there was this explosion in demand for something you use every day,
Yeah.
radio frequencies.
Ah, the dawn of the cell phone. Everyone wanted a piece of that wireless action.
Exactly. But the old ways of allocating radio spectrum,
Right.
things like beauty contests or lotteries,
Yeah.
they just weren't efficient.
Right.
And frankly, they weren't raising much money.
Yeah. Yeah.
The FCC, they desperately needed a better system.
Okay.
And along came Milgrom and Wilson.
This is where their research moves out of the classroom and into the real world. So what did they come up with?
They invented a whole new auction format,
Okay.
perfectly tailored to this challenge.
Okay.
The simultaneous multiple round auction, better known as the SMRA.
The SMRA.
It was a game changer.
All right, expert speaker, you've piqued our interest. Break down this SMRA for us. How does it work and why was it so revolutionary?
Okay. Imagine a supercharged game of musical chairs.
Okay.
But instead of chairs, you have radio frequency bands up for grabs.
Oh, wow.
Different chunks of that precious wireless spectrum.
And instead of the music stopping, you have rounds of bidding.
Yes.
I can just picture it. A room full of telecom bigwigs, fingers hovering over buttons, waiting to snatch up the best frequencies.
A very accurate image.
Yeah.
You're right. The SMRA lets them bid on numerous frequency bands simultaneously
Okay.
over multiple rounds.
Okay.
The auction kicks off with low prices, which then gradually increase.
So that gradual price increase reveals information.
Yes.
Just like those open outcry auctions, right? Bidders get a feel for what everyone else is willing to pay, and they can adapt their strategy accordingly.
Right. Again, that built-in information flow.
Yeah.
It helps minimize the risk of the winner's curse.
Right, right.
But here's the real kicker. They introduced something called activity rules.
Oh, this is where it gets juicy. Activity rules.
Yeah.
What are those, and how do they change the game?
Okay, so activity rules prevent bidders from just sitting back
Okay.
and waiting for that perfect moment.
Right.
They have to participate actively. They have to place bids regularly.
Okay.
Or they risk being kicked out.
Wow. It's like a high-stakes game of chicken. Be too cautious, you lose out.
Right.
Be too aggressive, and you could overpay. Sounds exhilarating.
You said it.
Yeah.
And the results speak for themselves.
Okay.
The very first FCC auction, using this SMRA format back in 1994,
Okay.
brought in a whopping $20 billion.
No way. That's double what they were expecting.
I know.
Talk about putting your money where your theory is. This wasn't just some academic exercise. The SMRA reshaped the entire telecom landscape.
It absolutely did. And because of its incredible success,
Right.
the SMRA has been adopted globally, generating hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue for governments.
Wow.
And efficiently allocating this incredibly valuable resource. This is a perfect example of how powerful a well-designed auction can be.
This is what this deep dive is all about. A true story of how economic theory changed the world.
Right.
But I have a feeling this isn't the end of the story. The world of wireless is constantly evolving.
It is.
And I bet Milgrom and Wilson were right there with it. Did they rest on their laurels after this?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The world of auctions is like a moving target
Yeah.
with new challenges popping up all the time.
Right.
As the use of radio spectrum expanded and diversified,
Yeah.
even more sophisticated auction formats were needed.
So the SMRA was just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
What other innovations did they cook up? And what problems were they trying to solve?
One challenge that kept cropping up,
Okay.
especially in these complex auctions, for multiple items,
Yeah.
was the need to allow for package bids.
Package bids.
Okay. This is especially important when the items being auctioned work together,
Right.
like adjacent spectrum licenses, for example.
That makes perfect sense. A telecom company building out their network,
Yes.
they need those neighboring frequencies to provide seamless coverage.
Yes.
Trying to buy them piecemeal would be a nightmare.
Exactly. So Milgrom and Wilson,
Yeah.
along with Preston McAfee,
Okay.
they designed yet another groundbreaking format,
Okay.
the combinatorial clock auction, or CCA for short.
All right, expert speaker, hit us with it. What makes the CCA so special, and how does it differ from the SMRA?
Think of the CCA as the SMRA's more intricate cousin.
Okay.
It's specifically designed to handle those complex scenarios
Okay.
where bidders need to snag a whole package of items to maximize their value.
Right.
It's a two-stage process.
2 stages, even more complex than the SMRA. Walk us through it.
Okay, so the first stage is all about figuring out who wins which package of items.
Okay.
It uses a clock format.
Okay.
The auctioneer announces prices. They gradually climb.
Okay.
And bidders indicate which packages they're interested in at that price. And this goes on until there's no more excess demand,
Okay.
meaning everyone who wants a specific package at that price can have it.
Okay, so it's like a high-speed, synchronized dance with
Yeah.
the price constantly moving
Yes.
and bidders trying to grab the best bundles for themselves before someone else does.
That's a great way to put it. And then comes stage 2, which determines the final price for each winning package.
Ah, so stage 1 is who gets what, and stage 2 is how much they pay. It sounds like a very elegant solution to a very complicated problem.
It really is. And just like the SMRA, it's designed to reduce that uncertainty,
Right.
lessen the chances of anyone getting hit with that winner's curse.
Makes sense.
But the CCA's real strength
Yeah.
is that it allows for those all-important package bids,
Right.
which is essential when you're auctioning off things that work together.
I'm sensing a pattern here. Milgrom and Wilson see a problem. They invent a solution.
Pretty much.
So I'm guessing this CCA didn't stay theoretical for long either. Where was it put to work in the real world?
You know, you'd be surprised. A lot of industries rely on the CCA nowadays.
Really?
Oh, yeah. There's been a huge success in auctions for things like electricity,
Okay.
natural gas,
Okay.
and, of course, our old friend, radio spectrum.
Makes sense.
We're talking like Canada, the UK, Australia.
Wow.
The CCA's everywhere.
It's like Milgrom and Wilson had a crystal ball predicting the future of auctions. But did their innovation stop there? Were there any other auction design challenges that they decided to tackle?
Well, there's one more breakthrough I have to tell you about.
Okay.
The incentive auction.
Okay.
This one was specifically designed to help shift radio spectrum from one use to another.
Okay, now that is fascinating. Repurposing spectrum. It sounds like something out of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Tell us more about this incentive auction. What was the goal? How'd they pull it off?
All right. So picture this. The FCC wants to move some of the radio spectrum being used for broadcast television
Okay.
over to wireless broadband.
Okay.
You know, the stuff that makes your smartphone work.
Makes sense. Fewer people tuning into broadcast TV these days, but demand for mobile data, it's skyrocketing. But how do you convince those existing broadcasters to just give up their valuable slice of the spectrum?
That's where the incentive part comes in.
Okay.
Milgrom and Wilson designed this brilliant two-stage process.
Okay.
First, they hold a reverse auction.
A reverse auction.
Yeah.
So it's like the bidders are setting the price and the lowest bidder wins.
Yes,
That's a pretty cool concept.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the broadcasters, they're essentially bidding on how little they're willing to accept to give up their licenses.
Okay.
The lowest bidders win.
Right.
The government buys their spectrum,
Okay.
and then comes stage two.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What happens in stage two?
Stage two is the more traditional forward auction. Now that the government has all this newly available spectrum, telecom companies start duking it out to buy it up.
It's such a clever solution. It's a win-win for everyone involved. The broadcasters get a nice payout, the government gets more revenue,
Right.
and the telecom companies get the spectrum they need to provide faster, more reliable wireless internet. Everybody wins.
Precisely. And this wasn't just theoretical. The first incentive auction was held in 2017.
Okay.
It generated almost $10 billion for the U.S. Treasury.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Real-world impact. It's amazing.
Plus, it freed up a huge chunk of spectrum for mobile broadband.
Another Milgrom and Wilson success story. Their impact on how we use and value these critical resources, it's incredible. It makes you appreciate the power of a well-designed auction. But before we wrap up, are there any catches to all of this? I mean, is the world of auction design really this smooth?
Well, while these sophisticated auction formats are powerful tools,
Right,
we have to remember that real-world auctions, they aren't perfect.
right.
There are always factors that can mess things up.
Okay, so like what could go wrong? Give us an example or two.
Well, for starters, even a flawlessly designed auction can be ruined by poor planning.
Okay.
Let's say someone sets like unrealistic reserve prices. That's the minimum bid the seller will accept.
Right.
They set it too high. You risk scaring off potential bidders and ending up with disappointing revenue.
Yeah, makes sense. If the starting price is outrageous, nobody's going to bid.
Yeah.
What else?
Another problem is poorly designed bidding credit schemes. You want a level playing field. But if the rules favor some bidders over others,
Right.
that can distort the whole market.
Yeah.
Fairness and transparency are key.
Absolutely. It's all about making sure everyone plays by the same rules. Any other potential pitfalls?
Even with a great design, sometimes external factors can throw a wrench in the works.
Okay.
For example, let's say there's a big delay
Yeah.
between announcing an option and actually holding it.
Right.
That kind of uncertainty can create opportunities for collusion.
I see what you mean. If the bidders have too much time to strategize and coordinate,
Exactly.
they might try to game the system. It's like giving students all the answers to a test beforehand.
Right.
Not exactly fair.
Exactly. And of course, let's not forget about good old-fashioned politics.
Right. Of course.
Powerful companies, deep pockets.
Yeah.
They can sometimes influence auction rules to benefit themselves. That can really undermine a truly fair and competitive market.
It sounds like a constant balancing act, juggling economic theory and real-world complexities. But wouldn't you say that, on the whole, the work of Milgrom and Wilson has been a force for good in the world?
Without a doubt. Their research has completely revolutionized both the theory and practice of auctions, making the allocation of valuable resources far more efficient.
Yeah.
And generating enormous value for governments and societies all over the planet.
It really drives home the point that even the most complex economic ideas can have a huge impact on our everyday lives,
They do.
even if we don't always see the connections. Who knew there was so much strategy lurking behind every auction?
Right.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. From ancient Rome to billion-dollar radio waves, who knew the world of auctions was so fascinating? We went from zero to auction experts in just a few minutes.
You did? Yeah.
All thanks to the incredible work of Milgrom and Wilson.
Amazing work.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And remember, listeners, the next time you're at an auction, bid wisely.